Welcome, welcome, welcome to part 8 of the Ultimate Sunrise on the Reaping Deep Dive! I'm covering chapter 21, digging around for symbolism and connections to the best book series of all time, The Hunger Games. I know it's unusual that I'm just covering one chapter in this video, and I'm really sorry if you're disappointed about that. It's a really busy time of year, so it was either do 2 chapters and wait to post until January, or do 1 chapter and post now. So here we are. As usual, I'm focused on the books and not the film adaptations, and there are no spoilers beyond the specific Sunrise on the Reaping chapter I am discussing. However, everything else from the other books is fair game since this is a prequel, and significant plot points of Haymitch's story in Sunrise are given away in the trilogy. There's the edited recap of the 50th Games in Catching Fire chapter 14, and the fates of his loved ones in chapter 12 of Mockingjay, and I use this context in my analysis. Each chapter review is organized into 7 sections. There's the recap, character analysis, symbols and themes, lore and world building, possible foreshadowing, series connections, and notable quotes. If you'd like to watch or listen to this without any interruptions, the ad-free version is on my Patreon, along with all of my long-form videos with the option to download them as podcasts. There's also monthly live streams and some fun stuff over there. Last thing before we get going, my videos focus on the fictional world of Panem, but there are hungry people in the real one, and food banks could always use more help. So please consider contributing to food pantries if you are able to do so, and there's some links below of where to donate. And with that, my buddies and sweethearts, let's dive in. Chapter 21, Recap. With the ladybug mutts having latched onto them, Maisie and Haymitch flee from the hedge maze. The mouths of these bugs are like tiny hypodermic needles, and they seem to suck up blood until they explode. So they're more like leeches and ticks than ladybugs. Awesome. Love that. Maisie has enough sense to yank them off, and Haymitch follows suit. It's a gnarly process. The suckers are dug in deep, akin to those on a really determined tick. If they get a grip up near the head and pull firmly and slowly, they pop out in a spray of blood. Yuck! Haymitch and Maisie try to stay grounded by chanting bug by bug as they pluck them off their bodies. Haymitch had them on his arms, neck, face, and a couple under his shirt and pants. Maisie didn't have shirt sleeves, so she got the worst of it and needs Haymitch's help. They both need to strip down to their underclothes to get rid of them all, and once the bugs are all gone, they're woozy due to significant blood loss. Haymitch apologizes for what happened since he was talking big like he knew what was in the hedges. It's crystal clear now that the game makers do not want anyone going in there. To regain some strength, they eat some beef jerky, and Haymitch tries his first olive. Maisie eats her jerky with a knife and fork, of course. A while later, it starts to rain, and they set up their tarps and jugs to collect the water, using fallen branches as posts to hold them up. During the downpour, Maisie and Haymitch do their best to clean themselves as well, and it abruptly stops raining after about 20 minutes. They joke around that they're bloodkin now, as in fully related. Haymitch thinks he swallowed enough of Maisie's blood to qualify. Sweet, but gross. Maisie asks if he ever wanted a real sister, and he tells her about his twin sisters who passed away shortly after they were born. Then Maisie asks the devastating question if her sister will still be a twin after she's gone. And Haymitch says, always. It's a double whammy with the Katniss and Peeta always. Both Maisie and Haymitch are really worried about how their deaths will affect their siblings. Then they hear 2 cannons go off, and Haymitch and Maisie talk about what they'll do as newcomers if the last 2 careers, Silka and Marit, are dead. They'd have another meeting like Maisie said in the Capitol, and if they agree to uphold the alliance, maybe they would face mutts, more lava, or just starve. Maisie wants to go to the cornucopia to look for food, and even though it's 6 miles away and Haymitch is wiped out, he agrees to go. He feels he owes her one for setting off a swarm of blood-sucking ladybug mutts on her. Very honorable. After hiking a few miles, Maisie hears a strange sound, almost like a crying baby. Haymitch imagines cannibalistic baby mutts with horns and fluffy tails. Spectacular. He doesn't want to go anywhere near that noise, but then they hear a male's agonized scream, which has to belong to either Buck from 10 or Hull from 11. Maisie is determined to help and loads her blowgun. Haymitch grabs his knife and an axe, and they head towards the noise. They come to a stop when about 15 feet away, Buck and Chicory lie writhing on the ground. Long metallic spikes that resemble knitting needles protrude from their flesh. They paw at them with clumsy hands, as if they've got really bad frostbite frostbite or something's disabled their fingers. Saying they're pawing at themselves, like their hands are paws, like they're animals, that dehumanizing language that we see so often in the book. Anyways, this sounds like a horrible situation. Then Haymitch and Maisie see it. A porcupine-esque mutt the size of a bear, complete with claws and sharp teeth. It's striking in its way, with rows of pure gold, silver, and bronze quills adorning its back, sides, and tail. The weird baby sounds are coming from it. For reference, here are the noises a normal porcupine makes. So that tracks. Hull is trying to fight the porcupine with a pitchfork, and he already has a bunch of quills dangling from his swollen face. So these quills cause pain, swelling, and numbness. The porcupine fights him by backing toward him, its deadly rear raised and bristling. I'm sorry, deadly rear is hilarious. Ooh, she's got a deadly rear on her. Maisie has the idea to use their tarps as a shield, so they quickly stack them together and brainstorm a plan. If they get closer to the mutt, they could try to put a blow dart in it or stab it with a knife, but they're worried they wouldn't be able to pierce its thick skin. Haymitch has the idea of flipping it on its back with a branch so they can get its vulnerable underbelly. And as they talk through this, Hull is hit in the thigh with more quills. The mutt hears Haymitch prepping his flipping branch and moves towards him and Maisie. They put the double tarp in front of themselves and abandon the flipping idea. Maisie suggests throwing the axe at it since it's still too far for darts, and Haymitch is fairly experienced with axes from chopping wood for white liquor and laundry, and he practiced a bit in training too. He launches the axe at the mutt, and it makes one rotation before the blade buries itself in the beast's side. In response, the porcupine lines up its butt to them, and then it begins to demonstrate some unusual behavior, quivering at first, which leads to it shaking like a wet dog. The quills shoot out in a sunburst, and Maisie barely has time to yank the tarps back up before a dozen pierce them. Haymitch takes a quill to the end of his nose and almost gets one right in the eye. He pulls out the quill from his face, and tiny bits of his flesh cling to the barbed end. Ew. Maisie was hit in the cheek, and she's unhappy with Haymitch for being misinformed about mutts yet again, since he said the hedge was fine and that the porcupines can't shoot off quills. He's been a real jester flop in the clown square when it comes to arena safety. He's expecting the arena to follow normal natural laws, and that's just incorrect. The porcupine shook the axe out of its side along with its quills, and it's pissed, sending off another projectile attack, and Haymitch and Maisie avoid it with the tarp, but a cannon sounds, signaling the death of one of their allies. If they want to help the others, they need to give them the poison antidote to combat what's ever in these quills. The porcupine's tantrum reminds Haymitch of Sid when he was a little one, and he gets the idea to soothe it like a fussy baby instead of fighting it. Maisie suggests giving it food, so they start throwing olives to lead it away from them. Everybody loves salt, even porcupine monsters. Once they're out of olives, Haymitch throws the empty can, and it runs after it like a dog after a bone. But then another cannon goes off. Maisie runs to Hull, trying to get him to drink the antidote, and Haymitch checks for chicories and Buck's pulses just in case those cannons were for some unfortunate tribute elsewhere. Nothing. He turns his attention to Hull, pulling out the quills in his leg while Maisie continues giving him the antidote. Hull tries to swallow it, but his throat is closing up. Eventually, the cannon fires, but they keep tending to him for a few minutes more because maybe someone as young and strong and deserving of life as Hull might find his way back to it. But he doesn't. And so, finally, they give up. Oh. Then a hovercraft comes like a vulture hungry for the remains. More of that claws and jaws imagery. Maisie and Haymitch drink some of the antidote themselves, and it tastes like somebody mixed chalk bits in buttermilk and forgot to stir it. Maisie and Haymitch gently close the eyes of the fallen tributes and arrange their limbs so they're not contorted. As they leave the clearing, the claw retrieves the dead. Haymitch and Maisie sit down in a patch of Katniss, and she whispers, "One of us has to win this thing." The Katniss plant is tall, so it's hiding their mouths from the cameras. Maisie continues, "One of us has to be the worst victor in history. Tear up their scripts, tear down their celebrations, set fire to the victor's village. refuse to play their game. Mic drop! Maisley gets it. Haymitch and Maisley pinky swear to make sure the Capitol doesn't use their blood to paint their posters. They'll paint their own. And Maisley knows just where they can get the paint. Haymitch privately swears to try to keep her alive since he figures there's no way he'll be a victor after the messes he's made. They set up camp for the night, finding more food in the newcomers' backpacks to sustain them. There's water, a blanket, crackers, baked beans, and raisins mixed with nuts and candy, otherwise known as trail mix in the US. They eat their beans and trail mix by the fire and watch the nightly recap. The losses of Day 5 are Rangina and Autumn from District 7, Buck from 10, and Chicory and Hull from 11. 5 gone, 5 left. Just Haymitch, Maisley, Silka, Marit, and Little Welly remain. The plan Haymitch and Maisley make for tomorrow is to go to the cornucopia and hopefully find Welly. As Haymitch is settling in to sleep, he jokes about wanting a lullaby since Maisley had sarcastically suggested singing one to calm the porcupine. She reveals a song has been stuck in her head since the maze and sings it. I'm not singing it, I'll recite it. Ladybug, ladybug, fly away home. Your house is on fire, your children are gone. All except one who answers to Nan. She's hiding under the frying pan. Haymitch knows it from childhood, and he thinks about the lyrics. Ladybugs and fire and flying away. The pieces spin around in a tornado, then cling together like long-lost lovers. And I know how we're getting through that maze. End of chapter 21. Sounds like Haymitch is cooking up something good to solve this ladybug problem, and I've also been cooking up several wonderful somethings with Green Chef. Flawless transition. One thing I've been working on is getting more variety in my meals, and their kits make it easy, nutritious, and tasty. They have over 40 customizable weekly recipes to choose from, and they're designed to give you peace of mind. Everyone needs some peace, right? Each Green Chef box has certified organic produce and responsibly sourced ingredients. Plus, you can select recipes based on your preferences like plant-based, high protein, Mediterranean, high fiber, and more. Green Chef does all the research, meal planning, and grocery shopping for you so you can enjoy low prep, low mess meals. I really appreciate that they cut down food waste by 20% versus grocery shopping, and they offset 100% of delivery emissions. Yay! My favorite recipe of theirs right now is their Baharat spiced couscous salad. I could eat that every day. Go to greenchef.com/breadgraza and use code breadgraza to get started with 50% off Green Chef plus free Graza olive oil set in second and third boxes. That's code breadgraza at greenchef.com/breadgraza. Thank you so much, Green Chef, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into it. On to character analysis. Haymitch. Seeing his and Maisley's bond grow stronger here is so bittersweet. He really cares about her, and though he doesn't make a big deal out of it, telling her about his twin sisters showed how comfortable he's become with her. He's also really touched that she knows Sid's name and that he loved Taffy. This next thing is random, but what Haymitch imagines when he first hears the noises the porcupine mutts make sounds so much like the immortal children in the Twilight Saga. Haymitch's brain starts spinning images of ravenous babies designed with superhuman strength crawling around the woods, crying for us to help them, but really looking to swarm us and pick our bones clean as a wishbone with their chubby little fingers. If you don't care about Twilight, that's amazing. Good for you. Just humor me for a second. Immortal children were babies or small children who were turned into vampires much too early. They were outlawed because they couldn't be controlled, and their description is so much like Haymitch's imagined baby mutts. This is from Breaking Dawn. Adorable 2-year-olds with dimples and lisps that could destroy half a village in one of their tantrums. If they hungered, they fed, and no words of warning could restrain them. Same idea, right? And Haymitch is fixated on these things. He can't shake the image of those baby mutts. And later, once Haymitch knows it's not a baby, he describes, the porcupine goes on the rampage, stamping its feet and fussing like a toddler having a meltdown. Only I know it's nobody's baby, just an abomination whipped up in a test tube to murder us. And he treats it like a baby in order to get it away from them. Okay, I guess that's the foreshadowing. Him imagining that they're baby mutts foreshadows that they use the tactic of treating it like a baby to get away from it. And in case anyone's wondering, yes, I love Twilight, but it is not on par writing-wise with the Hunger Games series. On to Maisley. We gotta give our girl props for thinking fast and taking charge with the ladybug situation. She and Haymitch were running around screaming, trying to claw them off, and then she must have figured out you need to pluck them out versus drag them. And she orders Haymitch to pluck, and it works. And honestly, I'm not surprised. Maisie is a smart, take charge kind of gal. And later, despite Haymitch offering her beef jerky as an apology for getting them into this mess, she still insists they share everything 50-50. She doesn't want any handouts. The games are taking a huge toll on Maisie, understandably, and now that she's with Haymitch and feels comfortable with him, her confidence and bravado is falling away. Her outlook is bleak and she doesn't really believe she can win. She's miserable, but she still cares enough to want to help the newcomers. And of course, what she says about trying to be the worst victor in history and refusing to play the Capitol's game is huge. Super reminiscent of Peeta's famous line, "I keep wishing I could think of a way to show the Capitol they don't own me, that I'm more than just a piece in their games." Also, both nights she and Haymitch have been together, she volunteered to take the first watch. When they were practicing doing this at the apartment pre-games, Haymitch was the one doing that. On night 4 of the games, Maisie said, "You can sleep now if you want. I'm not tired," though she clearly was tired. She stayed up most of the night. And the night after, she said, "You sleep first, Haymitch. I'll keep watch." Possibly, Maisie is up to something, but it makes sense to me that she'd want this alone time before going to sleep. There's plenty of existential thoughts to be had as a tribute in the games. She could die at any moment, and she's grappling with having killed people. Maybe she wants to sleep as little as possible to avoid wasting whatever time she has left. And it's quite possible she has a hard time falling asleep in the arena, so she takes the first watch and stays up until she's so exhausted she'll drift off quickly. She's also probably dealing with nightmares like Haymitch and stays up to avoid having them. Or she could be using this time to hopefully be on camera so her loved ones see her. At night, there's less going on, so I figured the live feed of the games would be featuring tributes who are awake. I'm going off into imagination theorizing now. So what if, when she and Merrily said goodbye to each other, they planned a nightly meeting? They can't talk to each other, but Maisie could feel comforted knowing that her sister is watching her at this quiet time of night, and they could have a little twin telepathy moment. Some sort of secret handshake they give each other, even like the 3-finger salute, and Maisie would do it on camera, and Merrily can see it, and it's just a little emotional support to feel less alone. That would be really sweet. I'm just picturing Merrily like alone at night watching the screen and like looking at her sister. Now I want to cry. Anyways, maybe it's a combination of the things I listed that motivate her to stay awake. Or is she doing something in secret? What do you think? And now for the game makers. So here's my speculation on what's happening behind the scenes a bit. The rainstorm appears to be manufactured by the game makers. It starts normally with clouds slowly moving in, and after about 20 minutes, the clouds turn off like somebody twisted a faucet. Pretty certain this is the game makers giving the tributes drinking water. They gave them the opportunity to learn how to use tarps to collect the rainwater in training, so the game makers are allowing them to use these skills. Game makers have to control the pacing of the games, and from what we've seen in the books, the length of the games vary. They don't go on for a specific number of days or weeks. At this point, it's day 5 of the 50th games, and the safe drinking water from the cornucopia most likely is completely used up. When Haymitch and Maisie went through the careers backpacks on day 4, they found empty water jugs. The only way to hydrate the remaining tributes at this point are sponsor gifts and safe rainwater. So this 20-minute downpour is to prevent the remaining handful of tributes from anticlimactically dying of dehydration. I'm imagining the head game maker saying, "It's time to water the tributes," like they're plants. Haha. Next is Hull from District 11. Shout out to him for defending his allies to the end. He could have run away from the porcupine, but he refused to leave Buck and Chicory behind. Hull has been a stand-up dude throughout the book. When Panache was running around the training center shower, thrusting his privates at people and grunting, I'll never get over how vile that is, Hull kicked him in the gut to shut him down. Epic. Hull using a pitchfork as a weapon was foreshadowed a bit in chapter 8. Haymitch noted that during training, he flung a pitchfork and decapitated a dummy. Since he's good with a pitchfork, it makes sense he picked one up in the arena. Also, Ampert told Haymitch Hull's pack had a big bottle of the syrup antidote, which prevented them from death by poison. Rest in peace, Hull. I'm sorry. Symbols and themes. Ladybugs. So we have these ladybug mutts disguised as holly berries. It's commonly believed to be good luck if a ladybug lands on you, and conversely, bad luck to kill them. So we have some more twisted beauty and irony of these ladybug mutts landing on people and drinking their blood until the bugs explode, therefore killing themselves. Oh, given that Haymitch set off a bomb that resulted in bloodshed, it's very fitting that he's covered in exploding, blood-filled mutts. Back when Haymitch first saw them in their berry disguise, he noted they were sporting prickly green leaves. Seems like a little foreshadowing of the bug's hypodermic needle mouths. It's cool how in the berry lore of the trilogy, a pair of District 12 tributes rebelled against the game makers with Nightlock berries, and in Sunrise, another pair of District 12 tributes were punished with mutts cosplaying as berries for rebelling against the game makers, trying to break through the hedge. Maisley wasn't aware of the rebelliousness of trying to break through the maze, but still. And now for the Ladybug song. So this is a real song. It's a nursery rhyme with an unknown author. In the acknowledgement section of Sunrise, it says, Ladybug, Ladybug is a District 12 variation of a centuries-old nursery rhyme. I did some light internet research, and there are various versions of the song with different lyrics. In a version, instead of Ladybug, it is Ladybird, which means the same thing. They're just called Ladybirds in the United Kingdom and Ladybug in the US. I'm curious if in the UK edition of Sunrise it says Ladybird, so if you have a copy of that, please leave a comment. There's another lyric variation out there that changes your house is on fire, your children are gone to your house is on fire, your children shall burn. Wow, everybody's so creative. Dark. There's instead of all except one who answers to Nan, common versions say, and her name is Anne. Suzanne chose Nan instead, which is another name for a grandmother. This song is giving Haymitch an idea about using fire against the ladybugs. He thinks, I tried to fall asleep, but Maisley's earworm has given me a brainworm. Ladybug, fire, the flint striker, no, the blowtorch, fear. Fly away. The pieces spin around in a tornado, then cling together like long-lost lovers. I love that metaphor. I'm thinking about the meaning of the song in relation to the Hunger Games book, so from a symbolic standpoint, I see the lyrics about the fire and lost children tying into the later rebellion and the final bombing of Capitol Children. Also, during that bombing, Katniss was wearing a red hooded cloak, and ladybugs are red. I know in the movie it's blue, in the book it's red. And like the children in the song, Prim is gone and she's never coming back by the end. I'm not sure what to make of the frying pan and Nan, if there is anything to overanalyze. If you have ideas, please share them. Haymitch references his grandmother several times, but that's it, really. But how about this tornado and long-lost lovers? These lovers are the ladybugs clinging to fire and flight. There's the fire of rebellion, the Mockingjay flying. The revolution is a tornado of sorts, and Katniss is there in the thick of it, moving it forward, and she and Peeta were the star-crossed lovers. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble verbalizing this. If it makes sense, let me know. Now for the porcupine mutt. Earlier in the book, when Haymitch was getting prepped, we got the line, Vitus adds a handful of goo to my porcupine hair and massages it until it's no longer in danger of snapping off. And remember, we also had a squirrel comparison just a few sentences earlier. With his hair shaven, Haymitch felt like a skinned squirrel, raw and exposed. Some subtle foreshadowing of these mutts, perhaps? Hull having the quills in his face also made me think of Drusilla, since she had what looked like fancy thumbtacks encircling her face as sort of a punk facelift. The porcupine has a stench of musk and roses that makes Haymitch's eyes water. And roses, of course, are linked to snow. And in Mockingjay, the lizard mutts brought along a rose scent also. Not sure why these porcupines smell like roses. Maybe they were Snow's favorite or his idea. When Haymitch was on the swan phone with Lenore Dove at Plutarch's, he smelled a mix of roses and decaying meat off the Nepenthes. So it's another pairing of the scent of roses and something unpleasant. I'm picking everything apart about these porcupines, looking for stuff. The quills on the mutt were gold, silver, and bronze, like first, second, and third place medals. Sort of fits since the games are Panem's ultimate sporting event, like their Olympics. These are the second metallic colored mutts we've seen in the arena. Golden squirrels were the other ones. I don't know if there's any major color symbolism with these, but the gold, silver, bronze medal thing is fun. If I really wanted to reach, and I'm not saying this makes any sense at all, but for pattern recognition's sake, here's the primary mentions of these colors in the trilogy. There's a lot of gold, mainly with how it ties into the rebellion via the gold Mockingjay pin. The cornucopias were gold. It's also gold in Sunrise. In the 74th games, the bow and arrows were silver, and in the 75th, they were gold. Most of the mentions of silver are the sponsor parachutes, which were also used in the last bombing of the war. hair. And the only time the word bronze is in the trilogy is when it's about Finnick's bronze hair. And after Haymitch described the striking quills of the porcupine mutt, he thinks, "But I'm long over being seduced by the arena's beauty." The word seduced isn't in the trilogy, but seductive is. It's in there 3 times, and they're all about Finnick's voice. So we have the bronze hair and seduction, and Finnick being the only tie-in to the trilogy word-wise. If anyone thinks these dots connect, let me know. Just wanted to share my findings. These colors in Ballad aren't as major. The most significant thing is Corio's mother's silver makeup compact that held the rat poison. Lore and world building. Wildlife of District 12. It's confirmed that porcupines inhabit the hills around 12. Katniss didn't mention any in the trilogy, so I figure she didn't hunt them, or possibly they had migrated or died out. Lenore Dove called them quill pigs and defended their prickly reputation. They can't shoot quills like people think. You have to come in contact with them, especially their tails, and if you leave them be, they leave you be. Lenore Dove defending these animals reminds me a bit of Lucy Gray's friendliness with snakes. Next is mutt creation. These animal-like mutts manufactured for the games have multiple layers of propaganda. The 50th games have the most mutts per arena that we've seen. So far, there's tasering butterflies, rainbow bats, carnivorous squirrels, spike-hooved deer, foxes, blood-sucking ladybugs, gigantic porcupines. The dove gray rabbits might also be mutts, and from the recap in Catching Fire, we know there's pink bird mutts. That's a lot of mutts. In the 74th games, we only heard about tracker jackers, wolf mutts, and the mockingjays, though those are accidental mutts. They weren't really used as weapons. In the 75th, there were the monkey mutts, jabberjays, unspecified insect mutts, and an unspecified beast. Katniss didn't encounter those. And the 10th games only had the rainbow snakes. Anyways, the game makers appeared to have the time of their lives coming up with mutts for the second quarter quell. Aside from the twisted entertainment value they add to their TV show, these creations display the Capitol's power. There is no religious or spiritual god in Panem. The Capitol takes the place of God, and they're showing their control over nature. They create new life forms, their own little demons. How could the districts ever believe they could conquer the Capitol when they're whipping up flesh-eating squirrels they can control with the press of a button? It's a big deterrent, makes them feel very meek and powerless. Another aspect to these mutts is they reinforce the idea that people in the districts need to stay where they are because the wilderness outside the electric fences are much too dangerous. Katniss said they're taught that the woods beyond the fence are filled with beasts, and yes, there are some wild animals out there, but there's also food if you know how to find it. Most people in the districts have never seen a predatory animal face to face. They stay inside the fence, and any cougars or bears stay out of sight. The district people only know about these other animals from images in school textbooks and mutts in the games. I bet many people believe those mutts in the games are in the wild too, or something very close to them at least. The Capitol just put a little extra spice on them for the games. If you're someone who's never encountered a deer before and your only benchmark for what they are these aggressive spiky-hooved things in the games, you'd be terrified to sneak under the fence and would be relieved to have this protection from them from the Capitol with this fence, which is what the Capitol wants. They want these district people to stay in their cages. Possible foreshadowing. Post-games fallout. We have this gorgeous, ominous passage that sounds very foreshadowy. Here's the quote. "After the games comes the fallout from the games, spreading out like ripples in a pond when you toss in a rock. Concentric circles of damage washing over the dead tributes' families, their friends, their neighbors, to the ends of the district. Those in closest get hit the worst. White liquor and depression, broken families and violence and suicide. We never really recover, just move on the best we can." We know from the trilogy, the people closest to Haymitch, his mother and younger brother and girl, will be dead 2 weeks after he is crowned victor. And we know by Katniss's era, Haymitch has been a long-time alcoholic, primarily drinking white liquor. And we have the broken families of the other tributes from 12, including the Chances, who will be grieving, possibly facing depression, substance abuse, violence, and suicide. There's also a little dialogue series connection here with the "we never really recover, just move on the best we can." It's when Katniss is dancing with Plutarch at the mansion party. He jokes that he never recovered from falling in the punch bowl when she shot an arrow at the game makers the previous year. Stay with me. After he said that, Katniss thought, "I want to point out that 22 dead tributes will never recover from the games he helped create either." Series connections. Olives. Haymitch eats his first ever olive in the arena. Maisley seems to be aware that the salt from them will will help their wooziness, giving them some electrolytes. Since Maisley has been making candy her whole life, I imagine she has a better knowledge of chemistry than the average person in 12. When Haymitch eats the olive, he notes its smooth skin and the strange, rich taste, tangy and metallic. Earlier, he noted that the poisoned water in the stream tasted metallic also. These olives weren't toxic, but I wonder if this is some possible foreshadowing that olives will be linked to poisoning. In Sunrise so far, the word olive is only used when talking about actual olives, but in the trilogy and ballad, it's only used as a color, specifically the olive skin of the people from the seam. In chapter 1 of both The Hunger Games and Catching Fire, Katniss describes herself and Gale as having dark straight hair, olive skin, and gray eyes. I'm pretty sure Haymitch's skin color wasn't explicitly described, but it's basically implied he also has olive skin since he has dark curly hair and gray seam eyes. I don't know if there's an intentional link here, but this divide on how the word olive is used across the series stood out to me. Could also be some symbolism to Haymitch and Maisley eating olives together as allies. Him being from the seam, the people with the olive skin, and her being from the merchant class, blonde hair and blue-eyed. An olive branch represents peace and reconciliation. In this chapter, there's also a dialogue link when Haymitch says, "I guess it's too much to hope it's Silka and Marit," after the two cannons went off. In the 74th games, when the only tributes remaining are Katniss, Peeta, Cato, and Thresh, Peeta said something similar. So, Cato and Thresh, huh? I guess it's too much to hope that they'll simultaneously destroy each other. So they use that phrase the same way, pretty much, wishing that the two tributes outside of their alliance would die. Ear damage. Haymitch's ear was affected by the water tank explosion. Things sound kind of muffled and partial, like he's got bits of cotton wool in his ears. Katniss also had hearing loss from the cornucopia explosion. One was ringing for a while, and she couldn't hear anything in the other. After the games, the Capitol repaired it though, and in the Quarter Quell, she used that ear surgery as an excuse as to why she could tell there was a force field ahead, that she could hear it. That was a lie though. She could see the force field square thing. But it is kind of cool in the second and third Quarter Quells, this use of like something additional being done to someone's ear affecting them is a thing. Next are Prim's pets. I'm counting this as an Easter egg. When Maisley hears the porcupine, she thinks it sounds like a goat or a kitten, and hello, Prim's pets were Lady the Goat and Buttercup the Cat, who she found when he was a kitten. Goats and kittens make very different noises, so pairing them together here feels deliberate. And now for Katniss, since Katniss the plant makes an appearance in this chapter. Before Haymitch goes to fight the porcupine, he ditches his pack in a patch of Katniss, and his pack is green, which is Katniss the person's favorite color. The way this moment is paired with the porcupine mutt solidifies this connection a bit for me, given the projectile quills. It makes me think of shooting arrows. The Katniss plant has arrow-shaped leaves. Katniss is an archer. It all fits. The most important aspect of this Katniss patch in Sunrise is the conversation of defiance and revolution that Maisley and Haymitch have while sitting in it. And it reads almost like a prophecy of the trilogy. Maisley says, "One of us has to be the worst victor in history. In the eyes of the Capitol, that is Katniss." The line "tear up their scripts," like how Katniss and Peeta go off the Game Maker script in the 74th games and literally go off script on the Victory Tour in District 11. The Game Maker script in the arena was to revoke the 2-victor rule change and have Katniss be the sole victor. Katniss refused to play their game, to follow their plan. The line "tear down their celebrations" is what happened at the interviews for the 75th games. The metaphorical bomb the Victor tributes built of riling up the crowd so they'd oppose the games, exploding with the Mockingjay dress transformation and the baby reveal, and holding hands in unity on stage. This was the night before the games, and that night is usually full of parties in the Capitol, and instead it was madness. The line "set fire to the Victor's Village" is a bit ironic because Victor's Village was the only place not set on fire when District 12 was bombed, but metaphorically, the whole concept of the all Victor Quell set the Victor's villages across Panem on fire. Katniss is what put this whole theme in motion, since Snow wanted to get rid of her and the rebellious fire she started so badly. Great passage. Next is Back from the Dead. This moment where Haymitch and Maisley keep trying to save Hull after his death cannon went off made me think of Finnick giving CPR to Peeta after his heart stopped. The cannon hadn't gone off for him yet, but he was basically dead for a couple minutes. He wasn't breathing and there was no pulse. Peeta was very lucky, but Hull unfortunately apparently was not, and Haymitch thinks about Hull being deserving of life. And before the third quell, Katniss is trying to convince Haymitch that Peeta deserves to be saved over her. And in this conversation, Haymitch had said Katniss could live 100 lifetimes and not deserve him. The emotions and motivations connect for me. Fallen tribute send-off, the way Maisie and Haymitch shut Hull, Buck, and Chicory's eyes and arranged their bodies properly so their family's last image wouldn't be of their contorted limbs, is like what Reaper did in the 10th games. He lined up the dead and covered them with the Panem flag. And after he died, Lucy Gray followed suit, closing his eyelids and covering him alongside the others. Also sort of like what Katniss did with Rue and the flowers. On to projectile weapons. Backtracking a little bit, but Katniss's weapon of choice being a bow and arrow and Maisley's being blow darts connects a bit. They're projectile weapons that require a launching device and sharp things to launch. It's different from throwing knives or a spear or something. They have these two-step systems. Katniss and Maisie were both female tributes from 12, and Maisley's weapons also link to Lucy Gray's, which is fitting since Maisie is between Katniss and Lucy Gray in the timeline. Poison blow darts for Maisie, and rat poison and a venomous snake for Lucy Gray. And during the games, Lucy Gray stashed a pink snake mutt in her pocket and killed Treach with it. Plus, that moment when Haymitch told Maisie she should shoot him with a dart if it came down to just them two, though he didn't think she'd be able to do that, reminds me of the end of the 74th games with Katniss and Peeta. When it was announced that there could only be one victor, Peeta told Katniss to shoot him with an arrow, but she said she couldn't and wouldn't, and then angrily told him to shoot her and live with that on his conscience. And Peeta said, "You know I can't." Peeta loved her so much. Notable quotes. Maisie says, "I guess you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar," which is a common saying, and I could have sworn Lucy Gray said it in Ballad, but she didn't. Maybe I'm just getting confused with her saying, "I'm not made out of sugar." That's all I have for notable quotes since I covered so many in the other sections of this chapter. But there is a surprise bonus section. There were a few things brought up in the comments of part 7 that I want to dive into. Firstly, a series connection for near death by careers. The moment when Haymitch stared down Panache in defiance as he was about to slice him with a sword is like what happened with Katniss and Clove. There were several commenters who pointed this out, so I'm just putting up a screenshot, and they are so right, and I'm kicking myself in the face and the butt for missing it. Oopsies. So at the feast, when Katniss was pinned down by Clove, she was showing off her knife collection and said, "I promised Cato if he let me have you, I'd give the audience a good show." The last words Haymitch said to Panache were, "Come on, at least slide my knife over here so we can give the people a show. A show with knives for both." Back to Katniss, when Clove is pinning her down, she narrates, "I won't close my eyes. The comment about Rue has filled me with fury. Enough fury, I think, to die with some dignity. As my last act of defiance, I will stare her down as long as I can see, which will probably not be an extended period of time, but I will stare her down. I will not cry out. I will die in my own small way, undefeated." And in the nick of time, Thrush pulls Clove off of Katniss and spares her. Haymitch's inner monologue with Panache was, "I brace myself for the blow, trying to look brave and defiant and proud, staring him down so hard he has to admit that even if he kills me, he hasn't defeated me. In my last moment, I need to see recognition of that." And then Maisie saves the day. So very similar thought processes for Katniss and Haymitch, staring their assailants down and putting on a brave face to show they haven't been fully defeated. And then they're saved at the last minute. Next topic is touching on what I said about Haymitch not being in any combat situations in the Revolution and having an aversion to it due to his own relationship to the games. I'm not sure how to pronounce this username. NOAMGIZ pointed out that Haymitch volunteered to go on the mission to rescue Peeta from the Capitol, but was turned away. So he was willing to put himself into battle since he cared about Peeta and felt very guilty for not rescuing him from the arena. Haymitch is talking to Katniss here and says Boggs was leading the mission and it was volunteer only, but he pretended not to notice me waving my hand in the air. See? He's already demonstrated good judgment. It's a bit of a full circle moment too. Haymitch said he'd volunteer for Peeta to go into the Quell, but he couldn't since his own name was pulled. And then Haymitch tried to volunteer to save Peeta from the Capitol and was turned away. The powers that be were really against Haymitch sacrificing himself for Peeta. But I mean, we've seen in Sunrise that when Haymitch puts himself in harm's way to protect others, like setting off the bomb so Amber doesn't have to, it doesn't end well. No good deed goes unpunished is very Haymitch. All right, that is it for chapter 21 and part 8 of the Ultimate Sunrise on the Reaping deep dive. Again, I apologize if you're bummed that this is a shorter video. Part 9 will be longer and should be up in about 2 weeks. I hope you had a good time listening to this, and happy holidays and best wishes for the new year. I really can't thank you enough for making my 2025 so very special. I made my first Hunger Games TikTok at the end of last year, just randomly. I wanted to rant about it, and because of the response, I kept making more, and then that led me to post on YouTube here, and everything that has come out of that has been just mind-blowing that I get to do this all the time, just talk about the Hunger Games obsessively. It's a dream I never knew I had come true, and I can't believe it. Like, this is probably one of the best years of my entire life. So thank you so much for listening to me talk about this and liking what I have to say. As Haymitch would say, I love you like all fire. And reminder, if you have the means, I strongly encourage you to support food banks. They could always use more donations and volunteers, and I have some resources linked below. Shout out to my Patreon friends. Thank you so much for your support. I had a really fun time on this month's live stream, hanging out and talking about the Hunger Games. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more Hunger Games analyses and do the thumbs up thing. And if it's the first week, do the hype points.